To those who are listening to my words now, beware, for they are full of such awesome, fantastic knowledge, the likes of which your mind cannot comprehend, that listening to even a fragment of the wisdom that I am about to impart will render you speechless. So sit down, get comfortable, grab an ale, and prepare yourself for the epic tale of what are you doing, Sandstar. Rune! You totally threw my concentration! I'm sure it wouldn't take very much to do that. What did you say? Nothing. What were you doing? I was about to regale these people with my epic tale. These people? Yes! There's nobody there, Sandstar. Well, they're not actually there, Rune. Not right now. They will be, though, when we go to the tavern after completing this quest. I'll be able to tell them all about all the heroic things I've done, and they'll be so impressed that they'll throw loads of money at us. I'll be throwing something, all right. What was that? Nothing. You seem pretty adamant that we'll complete this quest. It is our most challenging yet. It's only a time dragon, Rune. How dangerous can a time dragon be? Were you asleep when the Archmage told us about how dangerous time dragons are? No. Were you asleep when I told you how dangerous time dragons are? No. Were you asleep when Lilanva's god communicated to her in a vision just how dangerous time dragons are? Okay, that one, we were all asleep. She was asleep as well. Fair enough, but my point still stands, Sandstar. This is a dangerous mission. There's every chance that we're going to be wiped out of time itself. Oh, don't be ridiculous. We'll be fine. We have the magical MacGuffin. That's a rock. This wasn't the magical MacGuffin rock? No, Valendra has the magical MacGuffin rock. Because she won't trust me with it, because she thinks I'll sell it? Yes, that's pretty much it. I'm not going to sell the one thing that's going to ensure that we become legends throughout the realms forever. Okay, arguably we already are legends, because we did the whole Mithranor thing, and then we dealt with Drandragor and everything else, and really, we are famous beyond all reckoning. I'm surprised we don't get adulation wherever we go. All I'm saying is you need to think more about the now rather than the then. If your mind's in the now, you'll be ready for combat, and thus our chances of survival will be even greater. Yes, Rune, you've said it 12 times to me on this adventure already. You said it before we fought the vampire gnolls. You said it before we fought the living rocks that tried to kill us in an avalanche. You said it when we went planeswalking through that place where the snow was so cold that it landed as literal hailstones of doom that screamed at us. Honestly, you take all the fun out of adventuring. Adventuring's meant to be fun. Oh, never mind. Just go away. Let me practice my speech. If I can even remember it. You totally threw off my concentration. All right, fine. Breakfast will be ready in half an hour. Is it upside-down egg stew? You know the answer to that. I do. Hey, folks, it's Kikoskia here, welcoming you back not to Writing and Me, but DMing and Me. Something a little bit different. It's a segue from Writing and Me that started with the last video concerning the similarities between DMing a tabletop role-playing game and writing. These videos, predictably, are going to be about my various experiences with tabletop role-playing, talking about various aspects of it and imparting what advice I can to help you enjoy tabletop role-playing even more. This video is going to contain no gameplay or music whatsoever, much like the Writing and Me ones, allowing you to focus on whatever it is you're up to, whether it's writing, editing, reading, playing games, working, or preparing for your next tabletop role-playing adventure. And what am I going to start with for this one? I'm going to start with something that gets a fair few people nervous, especially DMs, and that is player conflict. Conflict is something that many tabletop role-playing sessions are built around, but not the kind of conflict I'm referring to. Good versus evil, law versus chaos, the players versus all of the NPCs that the DM runs to oppose them. You have at thee, be it with swords and spells, or laser guns, or mind powers, or the unstoppable force that is the cheese dimension, and either the players prevail or the players fail. And that rhymed! I'm a poet, and I did not realize I had the ability to create poetry so spontaneously. But what exactly is player conflict? Put simply, player conflict is when two players disagree on something in the game. And there are two types of player conflict. And we're going to talk about them in order of least worrying to most worrying. Because ultimately, there's always going to be player conflict. Players control characters who have very different motivations, goals, dreams, fears, backgrounds, and all of these things come together to create truly unique individuals who will have disagreements with other people in the party or NPCs that you encounter. And these disagreements are typically sorted out in in-game conflicts. When I say in-game, I mean it's characters disagreeing specifically. An example of a typical disagreement that can cause conflict is what to do if an enemy surrenders. There will be some people in the party who may think, this person's going to be a liability, or they're going to betray us, so we kill them now and carry on. Whereas other people, typically people of good alignment, will believe that they should take the prisoner with them to face justice, or possibly in the hopes that they can persuade this person that they're in the wrong and turn them from darkness, redeem them. This is an age-old conflict that comes up time and time again, and it makes for some brilliant role-playing, which leads to the first thing I want to say about in-character conflict. In-character conflict is not necessarily bad. Arguments will happen. It's inevitable that arguments will happen. But from these arguments and debates can come about brilliant role-playing and character development, as players explore facets of their character that they hadn't thought about, and develop that character's personality further through the argument. Characters can realise that they share common ground, or one character can slowly, over time, start to realise through the many arguments that they're in the wrong, and their opinion will change. Some of these opinions are so deeply intrinsic to a character that it can lead to a radical change in their perception of everything, which in older versions of D&D would translate into a change of alignment. That doesn't mean to say that as a DM you should go out of your way to create these conflicts. You don't actually have to do that, because more often than not these things will occur naturally through the course of an adventure or a campaign. Depending upon how well you know the characters, however, you can potentially see these conflicts in the future and prepare for them. When I say prepare, I don't mean that you should orchestrate things to make them as dramatic as possible. Again, the players are likely going to do that for you. What I mean is that you have to make sure that it doesn't bubble over beyond it being about player characters. I'll get into that a little bit later. Another classic example of player conflict is one that I'm sure you've seen many times before. The party has a roguish type, a thief, a scoundrel, a swindler, and they also have a character who sticks stubbornly to the law, and they're working together. This is inevitably going to spark conflict. The first time it'll happen is when the scoundrel is caught red-handed by the party doing something they shouldn't. Now, when I say they shouldn't, I mean in the eyes of the law, or in the eyes of the law-abiding character's ideologies. Whether the scoundrel-like character believes that what they're doing is wrong depends on their upbringing, their beliefs, and a myriad of other things. But they will butt heads. The law-abiding one will say that what they're doing is wrong and that they should stop doing that immediately. Some may even say that they should hand themselves into the authorities, whereas the roguish character will turn around and go, hey, without me, we wouldn't have got where we are right now. You need me and you need my skills. And typically, they're right. The scoundrel has a skill set that the law-abiding character does not have or chooses not to use, and so they're pretty indispensable. Often what will end up happening is that these two characters will butt heads every now and again about minor things, like pickpocketing or breaking into buildings, and the use of poisons is something that law-abiding characters will frown upon, and generally skirting and breaking the law to achieve what they need to do. These little things will add up over time, and will eventually come to some kind of zenith. The zenith will either be that the law-abiding character will lose their temper and will have had enough and will demand something be done, Or, more likely, the law-abiding character and the scoundrel come to an understanding. The understanding being that while what the scoundrel is doing is not right, and they do not condone of it, and they do not agree with it, all that they're doing is ultimately for a greater good. Every little thing the scoundrel is doing helps them get closer to defeating the barbarian warlord, or banishing the dragon demon back to its home dimension. And while they're not good, all the little bad things that the scoundrel is doing are negated by the amazing amount of good they do by saving the world. I actually have in our campaign now, the party has a nice mixture of alignments. My character is chaotic good, the bard is chaotic good, we have a warlock who is chaotic neutral, and then we have the rogue, who's lawful evil, and has been lawful evil ever since she joined the team. And my character and the rogue are firm friends. They have had conflicts, namely when the rogue does things that are especially evil. She has actually, when we had a prisoner, she has killed that prisoner when we weren't looking, and though she tried to pass it off as the prisoner dying from wounds that he'd sustained in the combat, some of us knew a bit better. But ultimately, they are very firm friends, because time and time again, they have saved one another's lives while adventuring. He has used his acrobatic combat style to take on foes that she wouldn't be able to deal with head-on, while providing a distraction so that she can flank and use her precise attacks to hit where it hurts. And she has used her great affinity with stealth, her ability to find traps, open locks, and spot things. She is one of the few people in the party, up until recently, that was able to spot anything. It's only been with a large increase in my character's wisdom and gaining a few ranks in spot and listen, as well as a ability that he's gained recently, that has meant that he's even passably decent at spotting things. And their abilities mesh together, and their personalities mesh together very well as well. When people say to you that characters of radically different alignments cannot be friends, don't believe it, because they certainly can be. But I digress. We talked a little bit about in-character conflict, which typically has arguments, has debate, but tends to be sorted out. You, as the DM, are there to observe and make sure that it doesn't boil over into the other thing that it can be, which is out-of-character conflict. That is bad. In-character conflict can have its messy points, especially when it gets quite protracted and can slow down play, but I usually find it's essential for character development and something that will eventually happen. Out-of-character conflict, that is when players start arguing with each other rather than the characters, and that arguing can really derail a campaign. It can actually destroy a campaign. And there are two types of out-of-character conflict. The first one is the kind that comes about from the game itself. One player can be making decisions for their character that another player really doesn't like, and slowly over time, these decisions build up into anger. These decisions annoy the player, and it becomes a squabble and an argument, and your job is to step in at that point and make sure that doesn't get worse. You step in at that point, stop the argument where it is, and you have to work through what the problem is about. You may have to work through it by speaking to one person and then to another person and then trying to come up with a compromise, but ultimately you're all there to have fun, and if an argument between the players is brewing because of actions in the game, that's no fun for anyone. Sometimes the thing can be sorted out. It can just be the fact that one player doesn't realise that what they're doing is annoying the other player. And when they're told about it, they realise, they apologise, and things carry on. Lessons learned, and the game resumes. There are times, however, when you can't mediate it well. And this is more often than not based on the other type of out-of-character conflict, which is that these people have a problem with each other that's not related to the game. Sometimes this can come about because they were in a different campaign and they had an argument then. Sometimes they just don't like each other that much. They realise as the game goes on that their personalities clash, that they get on each other's nerves, and slowly this develops into snide remarks, bickering, arguments, and eventually falling out. Very rarely, I've only had this happen once personally, do you have a situation where players don't get on and know they don't get on, and yet they still decide to play tabletop role-playing sessions together. That is a disaster waiting to happen, and if you know about it, it needs to be headed off at the pass early. As soon as you start seeing signs of out-of-character conflict, you need to sort that out. And sometimes, unfortunately, the only way you can sort it out is to have one person not play. It's not what you want to have happen at all. If you can, try your best to sort things out without going that far. But sometimes it just can't be sorted out like that. You can't work out the differences between the players, or the players refuse to even begin to seek a compromise. In those situations, there's not a lot you can do, and typically you either have to tell one particular person that they're not going to be in the sessions anymore, or, more likely, one person ends up leaving before you get to that point. It's exceptionally messy. It's the thing that can end friendships potentially, but sometimes that is just what happens. You don't ever want that to happen. I am very lucky in the fact that I have not really had that happen very often at all. Only very rarely have I had a tabletop role-playing session collapse like that. But it's always messy when it does. And when it does happen, you've just got to try and deal with it as best you can. There isn't any advice I can give you about dealing with particular people in that regard, because people, as I said near the beginning, are unique. And every person will deal with this differently. But ultimately, you need to make sure that not only people are having fun, but also that people are getting on, and if they can't get on, it will come to a head. It's not going to be good. But it is what it is, and once the dust has settled, you've got to see if you can carry on playing. Sometimes you'll be able to carry on, sometimes you won't be able to carry on, because the damage has been done, and the group disperses and doesn't want to play with each other anymore. And while that is regrettable, it is more desirable than it all ending in a humongous argument where everybody ends up hating each other. It may not seem like much of a victory, but if the campaign ends like that, and most people are on relatively good terms when it does, that is success. It's not the success you wanted, it certainly isn't slaying the demon dragon, but it is an end in itself. And so, hopefully I've given you a little bit of advice on what to do when it comes to conflict. The main thing you should take away from this is that in-character conflict will eventually happen. And your job isn't to stop it from happening, per se, it's to make sure that it doesn't boil over into out-of-character conflict. And if out-of-character conflict happens, you need to mediate and try your best to deal with that. Sometimes you can come up with a compromise, sometimes you can clear up the confusion, other times you just have to make do and try the best you can and hope that things don't end terribly badly. But sometimes it just will, and there's nothing you can do about it. Such is life. I hope that what I have told you here will help you when that happens. And remember, tabletop role-playing is about having fun. If you're not having fun, there's something wrong. And so, when we come back, we'll talk about something else. Will it be about tabletop role-playing? Will it be about writing? Will it be about the Threnody of Dusseldom? While I'm thinking about that, Chapter 5 of the Threnody of Dusseldom is now available to be read at kikoskia.com/writing/Dusseldom, spelled Dustledom. Hopefully, you'll enjoy it. And so, I'll catch you next time, folks, and I'll see you then. Later.